Action.
There's a chance, by the way, if the battery runs out in the camera, we might have to pause in the middle of this while Ronnie re-batteries and then start again, just so you know. Not start again, start from there.
Yeah, hopefully we won't have to start again. So we're DS6, Carl, myself, and Dennis as well. Just to speak a little bit about our backgrounds, I've worked for a number of London practices on projects of various scale. I've actually been in the very fortunate position where many of the projects that I've worked on have actually been built and gone on to win awards. Just a sort of snapshot there. The one on the top left is a project at Heathrow, which I sort of developed as part of a large team that included Carl and Grimshaw's also where I met Dennis. So there's a sort of thread there in practice that runs through.
Yeah, so as Nick said, I worked at Grimshaw as well. In 2012, set up my own company, Tectonic IP, developed a number of, I suppose, design thinking, strategic areas, worked across a number of subject matters, which actually went into areas such as medical, Ministry of Defence, Defence and Security, fashion, design, so it's just a broad range. And what I think is really important for me is the architectural learning is unique, so it's a way of finding ways to develop solutions for problems in areas that you can take that architectural thinking and place it across into different areas. What DS6 are going to be effectively asking of this year is to understand what is a smart city. You hear a lot about it, the word smart, and we're trying to understand exactly what that is. We know we're going to be asking questions. How do you make sense of a globally connected world where flow is everything? I think if we're seeing a presentation from Toby just gone, that's really about interconnectivity, flow of data, people, knowledge, information. What does that mean?
Capital, forces. I mean, there was a question before about how do you define technology if you're looking at something that's not necessarily in the sort of traditional built form. Well, actually, understanding structure is about understanding flow. And if you understand the flow of forces or ways of moving through a space, virtual or real, you're dealing with the same sort of issues.
I think the key, our sort of unique position as a studio, is we start with, the key is your perception of this world. So we all see the world through our lens, a very specific lens. And we develop language as a way of communicating that. But what's very evident is the way I see the world maybe is very different from the way you see the world. So it's really about this language and trying to understand this language and begin to use that as a tool, as a mechanism. We're witnessing emergence in novel technologies that expand the scope of human perception beyond its current limitations. And that becomes quite interesting right the way through to DNA recoding and other technologies. But the way DS6 approaches it, we begin to develop effectively a wearable, which is a way of opening yourself up into new technologies, new ways of coding, developing sort of parametric or sort of different methods of learning, but actually using that as a vehicle within the studio itself to understand the urban scape. So measuring, in a sense, measuring the invisible.
And in a way, augmenting your perception in terms of both potentially understanding something about yourself as much as the environment you're in. And that can come from the data sets that you're collecting from within the wearable that you've developed.
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea is we're trying to, the studio is effectively a platform for you to establish your own personal agenda. And we're starting with a philosophy from Carl Jung, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. So it's, you've got all these images, but actually you've been bombarded by these images. What do you really want? What's key to you? Throw away the Dazine magazine. That's an architecture, that's a manifestation of 20 years ago, thinking, what is key to you? And that's what we want to try to uncover, break down those preconceptions, and begin for you guys to reflect, critically reflect on what interests you. Bit of principles of the ethos of Studio. We're very interested in a holistic and integrated approach, which includes design thinking, workshops, network narratives, and what we call tribal source. So you guys are going to be exploring this, but you're going to be exchanging code, having conversations with each other, trying to understand, effectively trying to understand the lens from which the other individual is looking through, and finding a way of communicating.
So in the way that we approach all the technology, it's very much an open source studio. We're not worried about ownership. We're not worried if someone developed one little bit of script or whatever it is, that no one else can use that. It's about collectively learning.
Absolutely. And we're integrating technology and MPL, which means the idea is it just becomes everything is working towards this vision that you're trying to develop.
Which we found last year made the project stronger.
So we effectively create integrated framework iterative cycles that focuses on sense, map, analyze and formulate. Sense, you'll be developing the wearable technology which allows you to map the invisible data set within the urban realm or location in which you're trying to interrogate. You're using that data set to then run analysis on it and thus generating an information model. And from that information model, you generate your manifesto and a tectonic response from it. And it's important to know that these iterative cycles will continually develop this throughout. So in a way, instead of starting at the very point we've got this design and we want the end product, what we're always doing is we're saying, what could the end product be? Projecting, benchmarking, and continuously generating this throughout. The way we're looking into it is working through the sort of sense. Again, this is some example of DS6 work where they're actually generating the wearables and walking through a city. And what's interesting, everyone walked the same path, but everyone got a different understanding from their information models. I think that, again, plays into that, the lens. Where it becomes really fascinating is when you've taken all of this information, you're bringing it together and you're creating this holistic understanding. We're very interested in this human-machine interface, so working within simulation environments. And again, how frustrating is it when you've got an idea, geometry, a building in your mind and you're stuck with SketchUp? It's really painful. So what's really interesting is when you're looking at the access and interface and how you can better communicate your thinking, your internal manifestation, and project it and communicate it to others. Very interested in sort of understanding how people are working again within the space. So this is actually looking at sort of post or occupancy, real-time occupancy, and I think that's important. Real-time data sets, continuously understanding that, and how you can form your thesis around this. Another interesting point is the space of indeterminacy becomes a space of invention. So the areas that you have data for, it's quite clear you can rely on that, but the areas that you don't, you have to become a bit inventive in that, and that becomes also very interesting to play. Again, we'll be looking to encourage you to use advanced technologies, computation, animation, parametrics, with the idea that you can use these data sets to begin generating geometries and a tectonic response. And again, we're very interested in how you can use this data set. So if you're using motion capture, 3D body scan, parametric solutions, you can actually turn that into physical products through digital manufacturing.
So just to give you a flavour of some of the work over the last 2 years that has come out from the studio. Well, there it is. So looking in a bit more detail, just very briefly, I think one of the things that is quite unique to the studio is how we move from the wearable to a project. And there's a number of ways over the last couple of years that different students have done that. Sometimes, for example, Alex here, it was about developing an attitude. So he looked at branding, media, advertising, and essentially how that was creating these desires whether you like them or not, and created a wearable that was about sort of flashing LEDs in your face the moment you looked at something for too long. And that was developing a sort of subversive attitude to a predominant situation, an urban situation. And he then sort of mapped that onto Tokyo and looked at how developers were developing land there. So it wasn't necessarily a sort of a technological link. It was an intellectual link. And you know, other projects, as you'll see, were a bit more direct in terms of James, who was looking at particulates in air and was then sort of CFD modelling airflows around buildings and developed a project around that. So there's a number of ways that the wearable can feed in to help, really to help as a catalyst develop your agenda. So again, this was about, yeah, let's just keep going. So a few different projects there. And our intent for this year is essentially to think what a smart city could be or what it should be. We'll be going to South Korea, one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world. Where actually 4% of the workforce are robots.
So, yeah, this is very important. You know, this is an area, certainly in the industry, that is you know, the idea you can take a concept and take it all the way through to construction with digital manufacturing. This becomes very interesting, certainly in Korea.
We have the highest smartphone penetration and the fastest internet connection anywhere in the world, to the point where the government has actually set up camps to deal with child internet addiction, where temples meet skyscrapers, where street food is integral to the culture, and where the landscape towers above the towers below. And we'll also be visiting Songdo, which has been hailed as the world's first smart city. But we'll also be asking, how smart is it when it lays 20%